You're late again. Eleanor Whitmore's voice sliced cleanly through the room. Grace felt every eye shift before she heard the silence land. I apologize, Mrs. Whitmore, Grace said calmly. The hospital delayed the prescription pickup. Eleanor laughed softly. Always an excuse, she said. It's fascinating how some people think proximity to importance grants them importance. You stupid good-for-nothing nanny always has an excuse. This house is full of people who run companies, shape policy, and move markets, she said, smiling thinly. And yet we're delayed because a nanny couldn't manage her schedule. That's the problem with help, Eleanor continued. They forget their place when you let them get comfortable. Comfortable. Grace had raised Henry's daughter. Held this house together during financial winters. Sat beside Henry through diagnoses Eleanor couldn't emotionally tolerate. And yet, here she was, reduced to a punchline in a room full of people who had benefited from her silence. You may go, Eleanor said, dismissing her with a flick of the wrist. Try not to embarrass us again tonight. Grace walked away. Grace had come to America from Georgia, not the country, the state, with a borrowed suitcase and a promise she made to herself at 22. I will be steady even when life isn't. She was hired by Henry Whitmore in the late 1990s, back when his house was smaller and his ambition louder than his bank account. His daughter, Lily, had been 3 years old. Curious. Lonely. Brilliant. Grace read to her every night. Taught her numbers through songs. Sat with her during thunderstorms. Henry noticed everything. You ever think about doing more? He'd asked once, leaning against the kitchen counter as Grace worked through Lily's homework. Grace hesitated. Life took a detour. Henry smiled. Detours teach you the map better. He paid for her night classes. Finance. Accounting. Quietly. When Eleanor entered Henry's life years later, everything changed. Rules replaced trust. Image replaced substance. Grace receded, not out of fear, but strategy. Eleanor never asked why Henry's decisions grew sharper. Why do mistakes decrease? Why deals survived crises? She assumed success was contagious. It wasn't that it was curated. Cancer rearranges priorities with brutal efficiency. Henry weakened. Eleanor hardened. Where Eleanor managed appearances, Grace managed reality. Late nights. Insurance negotiations. Board calls muted on speaker while Henry slept. You should be resting, Grace told him once. He smiled weakly. Can't rest when the future's unfinished. You finished more than you know, she said. Henry's illness came suddenly, then all at once. Cancer doesn't negotiate. As Eleanor curated sympathy and managed optics, Grace sat at Henry's bedside. They spoke in fragments. Memories. Regrets. Promise me something, Henry whispered one night. Grace leaned closer. What is it? When I'm gone, don't let them rewrite me. Grace swallowed. I won't. He squeezed her hand. You've always been the steadiest thing in my life. Grace didn't cry. She had learned how to hold emotion without spilling it. The morning after Henry's funeral, the estate felt hollow. No flowers. No music. Just air heavy with assumption. Eleanor sat at the head of the living room, dressed in black silk, confidence intact. Grace stood near the doorway. The lawyer arrived on time. There is an addendum, he said. Eleanor stiffened. Henry's words unfolded slowly, deliberately. Recognition. Trust. Legacy. To Grace Thompson. The room shifted. Eleanor stood. This is a mistake. The lawyer didn't blink. Grace stepped forward, not triumphant, not angry. Just finished. I won't be staying, Grace said calmly. But I will ensure his wishes are honored. Eleanor's world narrowed. Grace had never needed the spotlight. She had already shaped the stage. Grace packed lightly. She didn't take souvenirs. At the door, Lily, now grown, hugged her tightly. You always knew, Lily whispered. Grace smiled. I always prepared. She left the estate without ceremony. But behind her, structures shifted. Boards changed. Foundations realigned. Power didn't vanish. It just returned to the hands that had always supported it. Some people mistake silence for weakness. Others mistake kindness for absence. But the most dangerous power is the kind that doesn't need recognition, only timing. And when it finally speaks, it doesn't raise its voice. It simply changes who the room listens to. If this story reminded you that dignity is a form of power, that preparation outlasts position, and that silence doesn't mean surrender, then you're in the right place. Subscribe to Hidden Tales Stories for narratives where truth unfolds slowly, power shifts realistically, and justice doesn't need to shout to be felt. And if you stayed until the end, leave a comment with one word this story left you with. Because stories like this don't just entertain, they recalibrate how we see the world.